Welcome to Dive Talk, episode number 29. I'm kind of bummed out at this point, to be honest. Like, we haven't been diving for I don't know how many days at this point. I'm feeling desperate.
You really have been. You were like texting me, when are we going diving? When are we going diving?
It's ridiculous.
But the last time we went diving, we just dove. It was cold, which is why we're talking about cold water diving today.
Exactly. Yeah, it was pretty cold. I think we try to brave the temperature with wetsuits. I know that yours, and we're gonna talk about potentially why your dry suit wasn't available, because I want to get into that because I think, we're gonna get into the topic of dry suits, and not all of them are for the same thing. They have their own missions. Let's just say.
Yes.
So we're gonna get into that, but it was interesting on this last trip because the water was pretty cold. I think it was 63, was it?
I mean, yeah, there was times where it was 63 degrees. I mean, I was shaking on the deco stop at a 5 mil.
Yeah.
Plus a 5 mil hood and vest and my heater on.
Yeah.
That's what wet does in below 65 degree water.
Yeah.
Very quickly.
I had an 8 mil on, and on that second dive, because you guys couldn't make it. It was
no
too
way
cold.
I was going back in.
But I didn't want to leave any lionfish alive. On that second dive, I felt so peaceful. Like, we went into this wreck that is not dived very often. Like, we found it that day, the coordinates or whatever. We went to it. Guys from Shark Quest did a good job finding it, and I went down there and I was there by myself basically. But that's because it was so cold.
I don't know how you did it, dude. I gave you a lot of credit. You were determined to go down and get those lionfish. Only you could handle that. There was no chance me or the other guy with me, Dave, could handle it. I would have been. And the thing about why we couldn't handle it, it's not only that we were cold, but we were also cognizant of sort of the risks associated with diving. And we're diving in deco diving cold.
Yeah.
That is a bad idea, and we'll probably be touching on that as well during this show.
For sure. But yeah, on the last episode, we talked about diving deep, right? Because we were just going through something, again, on Facebook, people speculating whether you can dive deep on air or not or whatever. And this episode is directly affected by our experience. Actually, the next day after we recorded that episode, which was that super cold day of diving, we were like,
by the way, it was,
hey, we got to talk about this.
People are probably like, well, where did you dive? It was the Gulf of Mexico, out off the Pensacola area, about 20 miles out, not far from the Oriskany, but in the Gulf of Mexico can be cold, but certainly in the winter, the bottom temps are cold.
That's right.
To us. Now, I'm going Saturday ice diving in Utah underneath the ice. The water temp will be 30s.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody has and this is important, it's going to set up the show. Everybody has a different definition of cold water diving.
Yeah.
It's really important. I just want to start the show with this. It's very important for you to know what's cold for you, or how long in a dive is it going to take you to become cold. And are you doing cold non-deco diving or cold deco diving? So I hope that sets up the topic.
Yeah.
Because we want to get into, let's talk about diving in cold water and why you may want to do that. We had a good reason for wanting to do that.
Right.
Because we wanted to increase our dive options. And the dive option specifically was to be able to slaughter lionfish.
For sure.
And so we had a purpose. We were going to, it's not too far away. So time of travel, that was about 5 hours from us, rather than going all the way down to South Florida, which is a 10 or 11 hour drive.
Right.
We said, okay, we'll dive cold. However, my dry suit, I would have definitely used it, but it was in repair. I had some micro holes in the feet. And some of the seams turn out, had a little bit of leak in it. So I wanted to get that repaired. And I did something that I usually don't do. I compromised and said, you know what? It's not going to be that bad. I'll be able to handle it. And I should have known better because I
You
can't handle
definitely.
cold water diving.
I knew that. Yeah.
You knew it.
When we went to
Absolutely.
Vortex Springs, because
Yeah.
one day the wind was, ridiculous, and like no boat went out, so we were like, well, we're like an hour from Vortex, let's just go diving. We wanted to try out the new DPVs and stuff.
Yes.
And Vortex Spring is 68 degrees year round, right? Same temperature year round, and you were freezing there.
Yes.
And I'm like, wow, like
And you warned me. You did, hey,
No,
I'm just
I
like,
didn't even-
tomorrow it's going to be colder. And I'm like, it'll be fine.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
we'll be lion fish hunting and we'll be excited.
We'll be moving around,
Moving
like our,
around.
yeah, our
Okay, I was
adrenaline.
wrong.
Yeah, definitely.
I was just flat out wrong. It happens. I was wrong. And I was shaking on the deco stop. Now that's dangerous.
Definitely.
We're going to talk about it. You can definitely affect your deco. But diving in cold water, just to continue that sort of an outline you and I put together,
Yes.
it does increase your dive site options.
For sure. Like, and I know, we've talked about it before where there's people that say, why would I dive in cold water? Like, warm water is so nice. Well, there are things you can't find in warm water. Like, if you want to do the caves in Florida,
Got to go to 72 degree water.
it's 72 degree
Some
water.
people would say that's warm.
yeah,
That's what I'm saying. It's a trick. This cold water definition is tricky. How about
Absolutely.
you want to see new animals, new organisms
yeah.
that aren't necessarily available? Like some people are totally in love with diving in the kelp forests of California and seeing the sea lions.
Yep.
Right? They're like underwater dogs and they blow bubbles at you.
What's that,
It's
like
cold.
55?
Yeah.
50
really
something
cold.
degrees? Yeah.
You better layer up.
Pretty
Right.
cold.
So that's cold.
Yeah, absolutely.
How about in general, visibility? People
For
will
sure.
tell you that cold water diving in general has better visibility. And I have found that to be the case.
Yep, absolutely.
But what do you need to be comfortable with, Gus? If you're going to do cold water diving, what is a very important topic that we have to discuss in this show?
For sure. So today we're going to talk about dry suits and being comfortable
Definitely.
diving with a dry suit. Not only that, but being knowledgeable about it. This is one of those things that when I started diving, as I mentioned, I wanted to go to Iceland, and I was sort of like, okay, like I can figure out how hard can it be or whatever. And somebody was like, you can drown on a dry suit. Like if you don't know how to use it, it can be a big deal, right? It's a problem.
And how about hypothermia? You
Yep.
want to talk about hypothermia? Flood a dry suit when you're ice diving. You're going to go, because I just did the class, you're going to go hypothermic in a couple of minutes. And remember to go hypothermic, it's only a 1 or 2 degree overall difference in your entire body temperature. It's very
not a
slight
whole lot.
margin. Isn't that amazing?
It's crazy.
And there's other things you got to consider besides dry suit, because I want to stay on our outline. What are some of the other things that we got to consider? Because it really affects a lot of our gear.
For sure. And it's interesting because when I went to Iceland, I took my own gear with me, my own
Okay.
BCD, my own regulator. I'm like, yeah, I want to test it to see if it really works. I knew
Okay.
the water was going to be like 33 degrees or whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember when I got in the water, the guy was like, hey, once you put the regulator in the water, do not take it out of the water
Cannot take it out of the water.
because the wind will freeze it.
It's the change from high pressure to low pressure. This is getting into Charles' law, is going to create even lower temperatures. So on top of that, you're breathing that regulator on the surface is creating a little bit of humidity inside of it.
Yep.
With that additional temperature change, you have
Frozen.
regulator icing. So that's one of the things we learn about really cold water diving is we don't test the regulator on the surface. You need to keep it underwater.
That's
Yeah,
right.
excellent point.
Yep. So there's a lot of stuff that we need to learn. But you mentioned that, it was dangerous to be on deco and being cold. Why is that? Like, what are some of the effects of cold water in the body?
That is a really great question because there's a lot of physiological effects. Okay, so blood shunting can occur in cold water. Increased risk of nitrogen becoming trapped. The fact of the matter is your body's just not moving around that nitrogen. It's not able to release that nitrogen nearly as fast.
So does
How
it
about-
happen? Does it happen? Like, and maybe this is more of a question for Doug, but like, I wonder if the stuff, like, on your skin when you're in cold water, your skin kinds of like gets compressed. It retracts. And I wonder if your organs inside as well, if they feel the cold, if they also do that compression, which then makes it harder for nitrogen to escape,
Yeah,
meaning it
yeah,
increases the chance of
yeah.
getting trapped.
Yes. So basically, what it means by this shunting. Okay, what does shunting blood away mean? The heat loss. Your body reacts to the heat loss by shunting blood away from the arms and legs.
Correct.
Okay, which increases the opportunity for nitrogen absorbed in the extremities to become trapped. It's pushing it back. It's not enabling it to get out to those outer limbs. I'm trying to make this a visual
Right.
sort of thing. It's shunting the blood away from that. So the nitrogen is all like compressed, bunched up, not able to get out of one particular spot. That
Exactly.
is really dangerous. You know what else is really interesting? Sometimes when you are getting prepared for cold water diving and you're getting in that dry suit because you know you're going to be in the cold water diving, you could actually easily get hyperthermia. The opposite is also a risk. You
That's
start
right.
burning up. I mean, you know that when me and you are getting
I get
dressed in
desperate.
August in the High Springs area, it's brutal.
I get desperate.
It's all we hear when we jump in is, oh, we are soaking wet inside your dry suit from sweat.
That's right.
But you can't not be in the dry suit because we're about to do a 3-hour cave dive in 72-degree water. So another physiological effect.
So before we start talking about the benefits of dry suit, let's just do a quick recap on the difference between a wetsuit and a dry suit. Like if you're a brand new diver, right? So just the 30-second abbreviated, I guess, explanation is on a wetsuit, it will trap a layer of water between your skin and the suit, and that layer of water will be heated up by your body temperature, and that layer of warm water at that point protects you from the outside water that is colder, the water that is outside of the wetsuit.
That is perfect.
On a dry suit, you don't have that layer of water. You're dry inside your suit. And the stuff that you're wearing between the dry suit and your skin is what protects you from the cold.
If it's a tri-lam dry suit,
Correct.
which isn't really adding any heat protection, it's just keeping you dry,
Correct.
then it's all about your thermal inside.
Yep.
But there are neoprene dry suits.
I wonder what's the split like between neoprene and tri-lam. Tri-lam is by far, at least from what I see, the most common one.
Common, it's lightweight.
It's easier to repair, I feel like.
Repair, easier to get in.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. When I dove in Iceland, I rented a dry suit, and they gave us 7mm neoprene dry suits. I think I had to wear, and I weigh 138 pounds. I think I had to wear I remember 35 or 38 pounds to get underwater. And for me, it was heavy. That's really hard to walk. You kind of had to walk from the parking lot into the dive area. And
that's right.
But I was warm.
But I'm glad you mentioned that. I think I had a tri-lam, but the point is especially with the tri-lam dry suits, the dry suits don't make you warm. That is, I feel, a big misconception with people that are not certified on dry suits or they've never been on a dry suit, which, by the way, I think the vast majority of people in the world learn how to dive on a dry suit because they're in cold waters, lakes, whatever.
Yeah.
But for the people that are not used to it, there's a misconception about the fact that dry suits will make you warm. No, what makes you warm is the stuff you wear inside of the dry suit.
That's a great point. And you can wear a heater inside the dry suit.
Correct.
And they have some heaters that have magnetic control, so you can put a little metal switch, if you will, against that magnetic control to change the settings or turn it off and on. But the other thing I think that you mentioned is they're different than a wetsuit in that there's a layer of air inside that dry suit.
Correct.
What happens to that layer of air as you go down underwater in a dry suit?
It compresses.
So you're being squeezed.
That's
Imagine, for those of you who haven't dove in a dry suit, that you put on a garbage bag. You just wrapped yourself up in a garbage bag, except for your mouth and nose, so you can breathe.
Right.
Imagine as you go down, that garbage bag is getting tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter around you. It could suffocate you. So it's extremely important that the inflator valve is not leaking and is working. because you're going to have to add air inside that dry suit as you're going down. Now that puts a bubble of air inside the dry suit. So it takes a minute because now your buoyancy is affected. And where is that bubble of air? Is it all the way up by your neck, just bubbling right out? Or is it moving all the way down to your feet where you're going to get yanked up to the surface upside down by your feet?
That's right.
You're changing your buoyancy and you're having to do a balancing act. And there's a whole discussion. Do I leave my valve open to let air out of it? Or do I close it? Or do I do a mixture of both? Or do I control my buoyancy from my BCD mostly or my dry suit mostly?
That's right.
You know that my answer, it may be a little different than yours, and that's totally okay.
Yeah.
Is that it depends. I don't do it the same way. I really started thinking about it after you mentioned it.
Right.
And I noticed that for me, it becomes like riding a bicycle and it's natural and I'm not even thinking about it. Sometimes I'm controlling my buoyancy more from the dry suit than I am from the BCD. Like, for example, if I know that I'm going to be moving up and down a lot through a cave system, like we're not at one spot, I know certain areas of the cave, here I go, I'm moving up, I got to go back down, I'm going to leave the valve open. And that's basically going to be moving that air all over the place inside the dry suit.
Right.
And at that point, I actually find myself to be doing a balance of controlling my buoyancy from the BCD and the dry suit. I'm using both.
That's nice.
But if I get to a depth and I'm staying at that depth, what I do is I get the dry suit with enough air in it to where I'm comfortable and it's a little bit in my feet. I happen to like a little bit of a squeeze and I'm sort of being lifted up a little bit by my feet, and then I close the valve so I'm no longer letting air out of it because I'm not really moving up and down very much anymore, and I don't really have to do anything with my BCD at that point.
Yep.
I can sort of add, if I'm moving a few feet, then I'm really controlling the buoyancy almost entirely from my dry suit. That's what I find myself doing.
Yeah, I think it's all about, like you said, it's like a bicycle. Like once you get used to it, you're not thinking about it. For me, because of the way I was taught, was just leave it open. It's a mushroom valve, like water is not getting in.
Yes.
And when you need to release air, you just have to lift your arm. You don't have to remember, like, do I have to open it? Do I have to close it? Like, what if you're holding a line because there's a lot of current? The last thing you want is let go to try to open your valve. And so just always leave it open. That's what my instructor told me. But it's also inconvenient in some cases because you could be going in a straight line, turn around to look at something, and then some air went out, and now you lost that perfect volume that you. So there is pros and cons to both. But it is true that I think the biggest challenge to suit diving is to learning how to manipulate that bubble. Yes. That is the thing that takes the most time.
It does.
And Brian, who was on the show before, he told us a very funny story, which is he said that his wife was trying a new dry suit, right? So it wasn't hers. It wasn't measured for her. It was like a tall, dry suit. But she's like, and dry suits don't have to be tight like wetsuits. So she put it on. She got on a pool, and she was kind of new at diving. And then she got inverted, which means all the air goes to your feet. Now,
right.
on the dry suit class, if you've never taken it, we teach you how to do this. We teach you how to recover from this.
That's right.
The problem is that because the suit was like a tall suit, her feet slid out of the boots and both legs were sticking out, inflated like SMBs, like surfer market buoys. They were just floating in the surface. So she couldn't like spin and rotate, and she was like trying to get somebody to help. She was completely stuck.
And that is a good point. When you put air in those boots, there's a risk that they can come off.
That's right.
That's the balance you just alluded to. Enough air in the feet to where it feels good to you. But if you put too much, man, there's so much air pushing out. It's pushing your boots off your feet.
That's right. You have to be careful. And with my dry suit, I have like something to tie them around my ankle. So once I put my feet inside the boot, they have like an ankle, like a Velcro thing. So it doesn't pop out even if it inflates.
Mine as well, yeah.
Right. Most dry suits will have that, but you do have to be careful. And the point is you have to train and get comfortable.
Definitely.
With your dry suit.
You don't want to have your boots off and no fins on and all the air trapped in your feet because of the example that you just gave.
Exactly.
You also have to factor in, I think you got to take into consideration cost. And
Yes.
I have found there's a huge range of cost in dry suits. I'm now getting a
All over
new
the
one
place.
made, for example,
Yep.
a custom made dry suit. They took 28 measurements on me. 28.
Nice.
When I sent them in, they were like, redo the following 6 because your math doesn't work. If we take all the vertical points, that's not adding up to your total height, or it's not adding up from the top of your head to the bottom of your crotch. They're that detailed.
Wow.
But now that we got all the measurements perfect, that thing is going to be exactly made for me. They even ask what type typically of undergarments do you wear, so they give you room for that and so forth.
That's awesome.
And it's made for, it's enhanced and made for cave diving, because that's mostly
Correct.
what I'm going to use it
And
for.
that is what I was going to mention. The reason why you dove wet in Pensacola was because your dry suit was getting fixed because you've been cave diving with it. But that dry suit is perfect for like ocean diving and whatnot. It's great to provide, I guess, how do you call it? Insulation from cold water if
Yes.
you're out in the ocean. But when you're dragging it against rock and going through restrictions and stuff like that, it's going to start getting damaged. It's not made for that. I was lucky that when I bought my dry suit, I made it custom made. And
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and this one, it was, I don't know how many measurements, but it's with an iPad.
It's
like,
a beautiful dry suit you have.
yeah, they put an iPad and they make you like turn this way, turn that
Yes,
way, and it's
same.
mapping everything. So
Yep.
it's the same thing. And I bought it with Kevlar rather than regular Trilam
Yeah.
because the guy that was kind of helping me pick my dry suit, and they sold a bunch of
Isn't
different brands.
Kevlar like bulletproof?
Yeah, exactly. It's tougher than Trilam for sure, but he was like, like you should get it because I use this for cave diving and it never rips. And I'm like, I have no interest in cave diving. Like I didn't even know about regulators back then when I bought this suit, or about rebreathers. That's what I meant, not regulators. But he was like, it doesn't matter. Like you're on the ocean, you get washed up against some rocks, whatever. Like there's current, you hit a coral. Last thing you need is, you're in the Galapagos, you get a gash on your suit, now it floods, you're going to be freezing. So just get the Kevlar cave diving dry suit. You'll thank me, even if you never cave dive.
That is true.
Luckily, I started
You have
cave
it.
diving, and now it
Yeah.
works perfectly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that is, we know that's what we're talking about. Factors for selection. You got to look at the features. You got to look at, I think, ease of repair. Is it going to be the kind of dry suit where you can change your own seals? Like I just popped off my seals and I put dry gloves on them because you can't dive in ice water with wet hands.
Yeah,
Right?
you'll freeze.
Easy to do. I could do that myself. Pop off the silicone seals, clip in the dry gloves. It's like a clip-in system. But some don't have that. And there's different reasons why you may or may not want that.
Right.
Price. You got to factor in the price. So they're not all made the same. They all have different reasons. And you ought to get yourself with somebody that knows a lot about them and spend the time to research it so you get one that's going to last you and fit the need that you have, like exactly what you said previously.
Yeah, and by the way, there are people that love dry suit diving even when it's warm. Like there's nothing wrong with you wearing a dry suit when it's warm. One of those people, for example, the leader of the Dirty Dozen, Aaron, he dives with a dry suit in Chalk Lagoon, the Marshall Islands, which are tropical destinations.
Yep.
But for him, and I asked him like, Aaron, why are you, every picture I see of you, I know is warm where you're diving, but you have a dry suit. Why?
Yes.
And it's like, well, because the wrecks that we hit have oil and have gasoline still like,
do.
coming out of them.
Yep.
A dry suit protects me from that. There's no water between my skin and the suit.
Makes
so
total sense for
yeah,
him.
so
Diving it all the time. That's
he dives it dry. Yeah.
just makes a lot of sense.
For
so
sure.
we've got all these different types of dry suit, different types of materials. So, let's rattle off a few. We talked about a neoprene dry suit. Think about that for really cold water. What is really cold water to you? I don't know. To me, it's anything below 70, but that's right. Some people are going to say that's crazy. I got to be in the 50s or 40s or 30s.
Right.
You've got compressed neoprene dry suits, nylon dry suits, vulcanized rubber dry suits. That thing's like made for warfare or something.
Yeah.
Trilaminate are the lighter weight ones that Gus and I are talking about. So most of your insulation is going to be internal from the layering you're due, or a
Correct.
dual layer dry suit. And listen, We don't have enough time to go through all the specifics of each one of those, but it's to make our listeners aware that, wow, there's a lot to consider when choosing a dry suit, and each one has a different purpose.
And there's another one, by the way, that I don't know about. I've never really looked into them. They're called semi-dry.
Yeah.
I don't know how those work. I understand wetsuits and I understand dry suits, but semi-dry
So
suits?
I've
I don't know.
dove semi-dries a few times. A semi-dry is, let me explain it this way. If a wetsuit is bringing in a warm layer of water that your body then heats up, it's continuing to bring in water. It's not just bringing in one layer and then that's it.
Yeah, it moves through it.
A semi-dry, you're not dry, but it's not letting a lot of water move in and out. It's
Okay.
drier than a wetsuit, but you're not dry. So
Right.
think of it as a very thick, very very dry wetsuit. Okay, but not a dry suit.
But you don't have to deal with inflation or anything like that.
Yeah,
So it's
So we use them we use those at the Georgia Aquarium to keep people warm in the cold water environments, but then they don't have to deal with all those other things that we talked about. You don't have
Right.
to deal with bringing a bubble inside of you and balancing the bubble. There's no risk of having the bubble go to your feet. It's still a wetsuit, although you really would not feel wet. It keeps you pretty warm.
that's good.
That's the best possible way I can describe it. You need a lot more weight than a regular wetsuit in a semi-dry.
Right. So another option that I remember having to pick when I ordered my dry suit was a P valve. Right? So that's another one that it was like, do you want one or not? And I thought I would, because obviously when I'm diving, I pee like 10 times within the first hour. So I'm like, I think I need it. And once again, the guy that kind of pointed me into the whole material that I chose, the Kevlar, he was like, you don't want a P valve. Like those things leak. Like they fail a lot.
I know a guy who has a P valve. And I can tell you, at least 50% of the time, I see him come out with a wet dry suit, flooded.
Yeah. So he was like, just hold it or wear a diaper or something. Just don't get it. It's better. Yeah. The least amount of potential failure points, the better when it comes to dry suit.
I agree. But now some of them do have a sort of an option that's a compromise. They have a zipper right where that area is. So you, instead of having to get totally out of your dry suit, which is a cumbersome process to get in it.
For sure.
You can just unzip your crotch area.
Right.
And
go to the bathroom.
Right. So those of you that do want to be able to go to the bathroom while you're diving in your dry suit,
right,
you're basically putting I don't know how to say it any other way, both for men and women, you're putting a condom on.
Yeah.
And you're peeing out into the open. It's going to leave the dry suit and go out into the open water.
Right.
For those that don't have it, and if you think you're going to pee a lot, you're either going to pee on yourself inside your dry suit, which is not going to be most people's preference, or guess what? Adult diapers.
You have to wear a diaper.
Fine. No big deal. I'm like you. I like that as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a really, really good point. What about the undergarments? There's a whole discussion and a whole realm. So many different products. So you got to think about what type of insulation, what type of material, and then how is that going to affect your weighting?
Right.
How is that going to affect your warmth? So you have to also consider that. And are you going to be wearing multiple layers underneath it?
That's right.
Is your dry suit big enough to accommodate those layers?
Yep.
That's a whole nother area of purchasing and decision you have to make.
Yep. And this is potentially like the biggest game changer. Like I feel if you can have a super expensive dry suit, but if your undergarments are awful, you're going to be cold. Like it doesn't matter how much money you paid for it. Your undergarment game has to be on point.
I agree. I tell you what I wear. I don't want to advertise any one product. As a first layer, I like that ExoWear by Bear. Mm-hmm. So it sort of wicks off water, and there may be a little bit of dampness that's coming in through your wrist seals or something, but sweat, for example.
Yeah.
So that way, and it adds a layer of warmth without adding buoyancy. So it's really nice. You could wear bare exo wear, frankly, as on a cold day, just walking around outside.
That's cool.
So it's really nice. It sort of wicks away water. And then on top of that, I wear my thicker dry suit garments that, just picture a thick cotton material all over my entire body. Now that does add the need for more weighting, and it adds thickness, and it obviously adds thermal protection.
For sure.
This is really going to be dependent upon the environment that you're diving in. But I think you said it best. That's the key in it, particularly in a tri-lam, the lighter weight dry suits. That's the key to staying warm.
That's right. Yeah, and what I do is, depending on the water that I'll be diving on, I'll either add or remove layers. Like I have this, long johns or whatever that I can wear underneath the fourth element, stuff that I wear, my I think it's called Arctic or whatever. And I wear that. That sucks, pants, everything on. And then on top of that, I have the dry suit. So if I'm going to Florida, for example, which is 72, that's not very cold. I don't wear like the underwear, the long john stuff. I just wear the fourth element, Arctic wear stuff and the dry suit, and that's it. That's enough. But, I'm comfortable even with a wetsuit in the caves. And that's another thing. I think the caves, for me, is a good example of a place where a dry suit is not just for protection of the cold, but it's also for trim and buoyancy control.
Definitely.
And having a secondary buoyancy control device that if my wing failed, I can still inflate, because the tanks that I use for cave diving are massive. They would just drop me to the floor.
In a cave, you need to be mostly feet up.
Correct.
So that's perfect to put the bubble where it enables your feet
Correct.
to be slightly feet up. And we all were talking to you and convincing you start diving it. And do you like it in the caves?
Yeah, absolutely.
Your trim was perfect after that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it sort of does it for you. And there's hoods. We got to, always think about the thickness of hoods, boots, gloves.
Yep.
Dry gloves, I told you, so your hands, that's what I just hooked up to mine for the ice diving. You would not be able to have your
What are you wearing, by the way, under the... Because dry gloves are like the dry suit. You have to have undergarments on your hands. You have to have regular gloves inside your dry gloves.
They're built in to the ones I got.
Oh, okay.
It's very
That's
nice.
cool.
They're already there. It's a very nice undergarment.
Yeah.
So there's a decision that, do you keep your wrist seals? Think about this. Do you keep your silicone wrist seals on when you then also attach the dry gloves? That's an option, because if your dry gloves for some reason leak or become detached, now you have a backup. Your wrist seals at least will keep you from completely flooding.
Your hands are going to freeze, but not your body.
And most people do this. This is what I'm doing. That's difficult. Imagine trying to get your arm through the wrist seal, and then also sliding all the way down into that dry glove.
That's
right?
going to be interesting.
I'm not keeping the silicone wrist seals on. Just the dry glove is attached, and it's a really good attachment. I don't think you could possibly pop this thing off.
I hope so.
So,
Can't wait
and
to
the
hear
instructor that I'm diving with, that's how he does it as well. But you have to understand that there's a risk associated with that. And then my hand slides into a glove of sorts that's inside the dry glove, like you said. It's a garment sort of built into it. It's good. It's nice.
Okay.
But the advantage of that is now the air also can pass into your hands, which keeps them warmer.
Game changer.
You are warmer when you take off the wrist seal.
That's right.
That's what the other instructor's like. That's why I do it. And I'm like, sold.
Wow.
Sold.
That sounds awesome.
So there's a lot of little things to really have to think about.
Yeah, and I know that I can attach dry gloves into my dry suit as well. I've just never done it. Like, I feel for cave diving and stuff, you need the dexterity, like tying lines and doing stuff. Like if I was going in Iceland where all I need is warm hands, then I think a dry or ice diving.
Ice diving, you're really just going to be holding on to a big thick rope.
Right.
You're not expected in ice diving to be you're not like setting lines and cookies and arrows.
Do you have to go diving with a tether, like a rope attached to you?
Both to the safety on the surface and to your buddy.
Wow.
Okay. And in fact, they do a fun little exercise where they're gonna have you imagine that my feet are touching the ice above me, so I'm hanging upside down.
Right.
And then through a signal by pulling the rope, It's like ready, set, go, and you ski across the entire ice. They pull you back
Upside
towards
down.
the opening upside down.
Nice.
So it's like you're filmed doing this, and it's like, woo, there he goes, flying.
That's cool.
And it's a weird to look at the video, like, how did they do that? You're actually upside down. Where is the bubble? It's mostly in your feet.
Yeah, of course.
So it'd be cool. I mean, I haven't done this before. I'm
Is it open circuit, by the way?
Yeah,
this class?
it's open circuit. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You could do rebreather, but we're
Well, if you're gonna be upside down and stuff,
Yeah,
probably
you
open
don't-
circuit is easier.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So you talked about buoyancy compensators. Got to use those. Got to test it with your dry suit. Weighting. What type of weighting?
Yeah, because that is, like you said, you had like, a quarter of your body weight on weight or more than a quarter
Yeah.
of your body weight on added weight when you did Iceland.
So where are you going to put it? Does it have integrated weights now? Does it have trim pockets? Is it a weight belt, or is it like a weight? There's like these. I don't know how you describe them.
Like
It's
these
a
trim
weighting
pockets
system
or
like
whatever?
like that go around your waist, and they're like trim pockets that go all around your waist. Those are very, very nice.
Yeah.
So, but that's going to totally affect your
Yeah.
buoyancy again.
Yep. And I remember, after learning to dive with integrated weight pockets and going into a weight belt, it can throw you off. Like if you're not used to it. And plus, again, if you're getting a weight belt, it's probably because you need like 40 pounds. So
Yes.
it's a lot of swinging, of
It is
the
a
weight
lot.
around your waist.
Yep. And in this case, you can also, what we're going to do is, I'm not going to be bringing my own BCD because these guys ice dive all the time. So the BCD that I'm going to be using has a 3mm stainless steel back plate
Nice.
built into it. Well, how about that for nice, even displacement of weight? Right.
That's
so,
good.
and then what kind of tanks? Are they aluminum? Are they steel?
That's right.
And we're going to figure it out. They told me, don't worry, we bring a slew of weight out there because nobody knows their weight when they first go in the first time they do ice diving. You're going to guess.
Is it
but
fresh water?
It's
Is it a
fresh
lake?
water. It's
Okay.
a lake.
All
Yep,
right.
it's fresh water. Thank goodness.
That's cool.
Yeah. Okay. So we have to deal with that.
It's funny because what everyone listening to the show knows that you just want to do this because of the chainsaw. Like no one
Totally.
believes you want to dive under ice. Like we listen to these episodes, we
Chainsaw.
know you're.
I want to cut the ice.
That's all you want to do.
Because listen, in order to get the credit, the check mark for the dive,
You have to.
15 minutes, right? So I've been posting back on Facebook, my dive will be 15 minutes and 1 second. So I don't make a mistake. And then it's like, pull out, probably. I mean, I'm probably going to be pretty cold. So what am I wearing under it? I'm bringing a lot of gear because we're also going snow skiing. I'm still thinking about it. I really am. I'm going to be wearing, I don't want it to be too thick. So similar to what I wear in cave diving, plus my heater, but probably a little bit of a thicker shirt as well on top of everything else. Like,
Yeah.
And long underwear, you know how they're thin, long
Yes,
underwear,
yes.
but they're not, but they add warmth. So I'll probably just add that as well.
Yeah, that's
And
what I did for Iceland.
Yeah. And I mean,
3 or 4 layers.
you're going to be colder than you normally would be, but
Yes.
I only have to be that cold for 15 minutes and 1 second.
And it's funny because when you get in the water with all those layers, you cannot feel it. Like you get in, and the water is ridiculous. It's 30 degrees
30
or whatever.
Plus
But
degrees.
but you don't feel anything until you put your face in the water.
Yep.
Then that's when you get slapped back to reality.
Yep. Nothing you can do about that. I'm wearing a 7 mil hood. And I think they start calling 7 mils dry-ish. At 7 mils, not too much water will be hitting the top of my head.
That's right.
But
Yeah.
it's a lot of stuff that's going to be on me. Now, I'm
Those are
told
tough.
that when we are doing the actual cutting, which is my favorite part, when I'm chainsawing and
I feel like
using
if there was a chainsaw specialty, that's what you would go for.
I'm
You
so
would be like, I'll
excited
skip
about
the
this.
diving. Let me
They're
just
like,
get the.
but you're not in your dry suit. They said, you're actually going to sweat. It'll be a cold day, and it looks like we're even going to be snowing when we're out there. They said, guarantee you're going to be sweating. Then they have an actual tent all the way out there in the ice that's heated. So you just have your dry suit in there, you walk back in the tent, you change, and you go in the water. And I'm not wearing my normal booties. I'm wearing my dry suit boots. They're thicker and bigger. So I have fins that fit the dry suit boots because you need bigger boots when
Right.
you're wearing dry suit boots. Those things
For
are
sure.
massive and thick. I'm
Yeah.
not risking my feet being freezing.
No.
I'm not going to last.
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
So
Too bad that you're not gonna have the new dry suit
I
to,
know.
to test it.
That would've been awesome.
While you're over there, because I think that thing is gonna be amazing.
I'm pretty excited about it, but I
Yeah.
don't. So now you got to deal with dressing. There's a
Yes.
whole bunch of skills related to just dressing. And you got to put on all of these undergarments and get in this dry suit. Some people say to use a spray that is appropriate for the type of seal that you have to make it a good lubricant. And I'm not going to take your thunder because I know you have a very wise recommendation on
The
this.
secret.
So you could use, some people will put a little bit of like the O2 lube around the silicone. That
Yes.
won't hurt silicone. You got to be careful with silicone. And that doesn't hurt it. And we would also always recommend, and I always ask my buddy to help me. I don't try to reach around and pull those zippers on my own. You can tear them or not zip them all the way.
Yep.
What do you use that's been super effective, you said, for you?
So when I did the class, they recommended talcum powder. They're like, just use talcum powder because it's easy to do. But I noticed that after I used it like once or twice, and it was on the dry suit that was rental, it started to build like a paste, and you can see the wrist seals and stuff to be like the paste of talcum powder started to stick to it, and I just didn't think that was gonna last very long for my own dry suit. So I did extensive research into this.
Okay.
And I found some obscure comment somewhere that said the secret to dry suit diving is KY jelly. Personal lubricant, water-based. It doesn't mess
Awesome.
up with any silicone seals or anything. It's
Have you been
perfect
using
for
it?
That's exactly what I've been using every
Awesome.
time I dive my dry suit. That thing, you slide through it. Like, they're not even tight around your wrists or neck or anything. Is perfect to put the thing on, and after you get in the water, it just washes away. Like, there's no residue, no marks on it. You cannot tell that you even had it. It only works when you put it on. It's easy to put on, and then it disappears.
But it's very
the best thing
important
ever.
because if you don't use something and you're not careful and you rip that seal
Yes.
and you don't notice that you ripped it, you could flood it. But if you do rip it, you got to get out of all of your gear, all of the undergarments that you put on. And this stuff took you, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. And imagine that. Now, the last step is sticking your hands through, rip, or your neck, rip.
Sick.
Everybody's waiting. Get out, repair it. Hopefully you have extras with you. So absolutely bring extra. And that's why you want to be able to repair those yourself. So
Yeah.
having that lubricant is really important.
Yeah. I gave Nick from Shark Quest the key, which was that lubricant, because he destroyed his wrist seal like the first time on the first dive. He was going to go out, and he's the first one. He's the one that puts the line on the boat and all of that. So he was about to jump in, like almost ready to go. Bam, destroyed the wrist seal. And he's really good at it. It was like NASCAR. Like, he replaced it like super fast. But I'm just thinking, like, if that was one of the last divers to jump in the water and it was a drift dive, like those 5-10 minutes that it took to repair that seal, like, you lost the group. Like,
Definitely.
it would have been probably you lost the whole dive. So I gave him the trick. He was like, oh my God, I didn't even think about it. Like, just try it. It's like $4. It will last you like 2 years.
Oh, I'm definitely only using that from now on.
It's
That's
awesome.
fantastic.
It's unbelievable.
No, that's
Yeah,
a definite now, because of you,
it's a winner.
a winner.
For
and
sure.
again, you want to make sure that you're careful and everything is closed, right?
Yeah.
You got to make sure that thing is closed up all the way.
Yeah,
All right.
and when you put those wrist seals, that's another thing I noticed, is make sure that they are pretty high up on your wrist,
great
because if
point.
they are close to your hand, when you squeeze your hands, the tendons and stuff,
That's
the
right.
veins right on your wrist
like a channel.
will make a gap and water will come in. So make sure you pull them up
Great point. And you got to be careful getting out of it as well.
for sure.
There's a whole bunch of procedures about getting out of it, and Yeah, again, have your buddy help you unzip it and so forth. And when you do that unzipping, everybody has that moment of,
Oh my God.
because you
Best
were a
feeling in
little
the
bit
world.
squeezed when you came up, and
For sure.
now all of a sudden you unzip it and all of that air just releases and you're back to feeling what your body is like. Oh, this is what it's like not to be squeezed, because you
It's
actually start to get
amazing.
used to being squeezed.
It's
It's a
amazing.
nice feeling.
For sure. The other thing I wanted to mention, and again, just to give the guys at Shark Quest a shout out, is they saw that we were freezing, and they had. I've never been on an operator that has this, by the way, or maybe I haven't paid attention, but they had this thing called boat coats, which were like this
awesome.
oversized coats that were waterproof on the outside, kind of like the same material that the dry suits are made of. But then on the inside, they were like fleece, like a towel type of warm material. Dude, I threw that thing on. It was the best.
The best.
Like, as soon as I got home, I ordered one.
Absolutely awesome.
And they're amazing. And the other thing about them is they're oversized, so you can change inside of them. Like, people use swimmers. I found them. Like, swimmers,
Very cool.
they're out of the beach or whatever. They put that thing on. You pull your arms inside of the coat, and they take their bathing suit off. They put their clothes on. Like, total privacy underneath it. It's like having your own personal size tent that is warm. So
Super cool.
definitely recommend it. It was awesome.
It
and
is.
there's a bunch of brands. Like, you can do your own research. I'm not pulling for one versus the other. Just that thing, this
Yes.
this dry robe that you put and are able to,
awesome.
wear even with your gear. Man, it was awesome.
I wrapped myself all up in that after our dive, that's for sure. Well, the other part of a dry suit diving that you have to think about is there's maintenance that goes along with these dry suits.
That's right.
And I will tell you that if you don't do the maintenance, you are going to harm your dry suit.
Yes.
I'm going to blame myself and say, I think I was not doing proper maintenance on mine, which is why it had to go in for repairs. Those seals, when you're sweating on them, salty sweat, and if you don't rinse out the inside of that dry suit and then take the outer shell off, turn your dry suit inside out, which is a bit of a pain, and let the inside dry, the person who repaired mine, who's an expert in this, said, you're going to affect those seams. And that's what we think happened to yours over time. Now, that was a lot of years and dry suit diving in it. So you really have to take care of it. You got to rinse it out. You got to remove salt, mud, and debris. You got to make sure it's completely dry before storing it. So don't leave it damp and wet, especially with your sweat in it. You've got to make sure the zippers are waxed, right? The zipper is everything. If that
Correct.
zipper is cracked, that's going to let water come in. The valves, those are just like a regulator valve. You got to flush them with fresh water.
Yep.
And then you don't want to store, particularly silicone. It can be affected by sunlight. It, I guess, destroys it, evaporates it.
Yeah, you don't want to just hang it outside, let it dry or whatever in the middle of the sun, because it will affect it.
It will ruin it.
Hot temperature, yeah.
Undergarments, got to take care of those. You got to wash them. So these are just general guidelines. Those of you who are dry suit divers probably know that, but those of you who are considering getting into it should know that this is part of what you would learn. You would also even learn how to do some repairs, which
Yep.
is
Like
good.
holes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And
When would you need it? When would you need a repair? And what if you got a hole on your shell of your dry suit? Is there anything that you can do on the spot? Is there little like sealant stuff?
Yep, and I think at least my dry suit, and I assume a lot of other brands too, come with
A little
like a
tube.
few patches and
Patches.
a way to repair it.
Yes.
And during the class, like regardless of the agency you take it with, I think I took mine with Patty, but I know the SSI material also has this information. They teach you how to do maintenance and some repairs that
Yes.
that will be applicable to most suits. But obviously, if you got one of these, interesting suits where the materials is galvanized, whatever, like
The rubber.
rubberized, double whatever.
Yeah.
They will come with their own, manual and instructions on how to repair them and all of that. And of course, if you're in doubt, find someone who knows what they're doing, just like you did with the guy that repair your suit.
Yes. And there's a lot of good
and get
YouTube,
it
by
done.
the way. If there's little things like I wasn't exactly sure how to put these dry suit gloves on. These days, I just YouTubed it. There's this one guy that's got like 20 YouTube videos on just dry suit stuff. This guy is like Mr. Dry Suit. So I was like, perfect. That's exactly what I'm going to do.
Good job.
So then the final thing, we talked all about all this stuff outside of the water with the dry suit. What can a diver expect to have to be able to do proficiently to get through a dry suit class? Let's both talk about some of those things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the fact that you have an added, like you mentioned, balloon that you're driving inside of, it's going to be affected as you go down and as you come up. Just like your BCD gets affected as you go down and come up, your lungs are affected as you go down, descent and ascent. So you have to learn how to do that. You have to learn how to recover from, getting the air on your feet and turn upside down. But most of it is just you have to learn how to manipulate the air inside the suit.
That's the big immediate coordination. But let's just talk about some of the other skills that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
First thing you got to do is you have to be able to do a weight check or a buoyancy check with a dry system. It's a little different than doing it with a out of dry suit.
Right.
And we're not here to teach you every skill right now, but we're going to go over that. How about this? There's a lot of valves. How about if the inflator valve is stuck closed?
Yep.
What if it's stuck open? The thing is firing air into you continuously.
That's right.
What about if it slowly leaks? Right? These are issues you have to deal with. You've got to be able to get neutral. Are you going to do it with your power inflator, oral inflation, air movement in the dry suit, the famous inverted diver position that we talked about that could happen?
Yes.
Dry suit overinflation. What do you do? How do you get it back to not being overinflated?
What if it floods?
What if it floods? What if you have a uncontrolled ascent? What do you do to make it a controlled ascent? And then we talked all about the care. So you're going to be prepared by the end of a dry suit class to dive in a dry suit.
Yes.
Why did we say all of this? I would highly recommend that you don't go buy in a dry suit, put one on, and get yourself down to 100 feet and think you can just manage this without somebody teaching you.
Yeah.
It's a progression. It's slow, and it starts with confined water. You're going to start off in a very basic pool environment and build up to it. Don't do this. It's different. But cold water diving is pretty cool.
Yeah.
That was the theme of our show, but we had to go through this, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other question that comes up a lot is, well, which one should I get? That's another one that I get all the time. Which one do you have and which one should I get?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that obviously that answer is a lot easier for people that are local to us because we can recommend places locally. But if you're somewhere else, overseas or whatever it is, just go to your local dive shop.
There you go.
Your local dive shop will have the knowledge. They've sold many of them. They've used many of them. They'll have instructors that have worked with different brands in different places.
Service them.
They can service them, etc. So go to your local dive shop. I know that it's a lot easier to just go online and Amazon and be like, I think I'm an extra large. Do I look extra large? Yeah, let's just go with it. Just don't do that. Go to your local dive shop, get measured, try. Some dive shop even have like a test drive. Like you can try, like maybe not in the water, but like put them on. How do you feel? How does it fit? And then try another one and another one. So depending on where you are,
These days we have reviews and all of that.
Depending on where you are, try to find people that have experience with it. Your local dive shop will help you out.
Yeah, and then what goes beyond this? What would be next after this first level of cold water diving and getting into learning how to use a dry suit? Then it would be severe cold water diving, like what I'm about to do, ice diving. And there's now, beyond the scope of today's conversation, how do you deal with severe hypothermia? There's active warming. There's inactive warming. How do you get the person out? What if they appear dead? Are they really dead? Right? Because the body is frozen, but it's not. There's a lot more
for sure
that you get into, like everything. So there's different levels of cold water diving. But I think a lot of our listeners would not have ever experienced this type of diving or would not have known what all is involved with understanding cold water diving, why you would want to do it, and what type of training you need to do it, and then that had to tie into dry suit. I hope it helped. I hope this gave some people
and don't run away from it, right? You don't always have to be warm and beautiful. Now, if you live in Belize or something, then okay.
Right.
Just do warm and beautiful every day.
There may not be a dry suit there.
You can just skip this show. But I don't be shy from it. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff to see out there where it's cold, and we love doing it, and hopefully we get people interested going to the local dive shop or whatever, getting into it, getting the game. Next thing you know, we'll be doing ice diving with chainsaws or
just the chainsaw, everybody. Just imagine, and I forget the other instrument that pounds and breaks the ice. Ogo. I forget. I don't even know the name of it. It's a motorized instrument that's pounding and breaking the ice along with the chainsaw. So you get to be the chainsaw guy. What kind of pattern do you cut in the ice? They teach you. I mean, I don't know. I'm getting ready to do this.
Yeah.
And by the way, they told us, be prepared for your 15-minute dive to be out there all day. We start at 9 a.m.
all day for 15 minutes.
We end at 5 p.m. It will take that long to prepare everything for this 15-minute dive. That's a lot of preparation.
Oh, my God.
Right? Because we're just walking out into the middle of a frozen lake.
Dude, you have to get at least a high five from like a beluga whale to make that worth it. Because
all day we're going to be out there, right? At 5:30, they should expect to see me in a hot tub somewhere in the little resort I'm staying in.
That's awesome. That's
what I'm going to be thinking about.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, for tuning in. By the way, if you want to see more of our adventure in, I guess, the Florida Panhandle, Pensacola, Vortex Spring, that whole thing, we recorded a video for the first time of this trip.
You did this.
It was
amazing.
Go check it out in our YouTube channel. Just search for Dive Talk or Dive Talk, just not even Dive Talk Media, and you'll find it. The trip to Pensacola. We've got some pretty good reviews.
Also, we mentioned, I know you just did a review on these two lights.
Yeah, the Orca torches.
And I think you said that if you get 1,000 subscribers, you will give those away.
We're going to give them away.
Which is
right.
great. I think that's awesome.
Absolutely.
And
we're
we
going to
should
give them
make
away.
that sort of a pattern. If people want us to test their gear,
yes,
it's not because we want to give it away, actually.
Unless we get a rebreather, then forget it.
Yeah. I mean, if you guys are sending me a custom-made dry suit, it's going to be really difficult for me to give that away.
Exactly.
But I'm saying the spirit of this is we want to be an information provider about diving. And I think we have pretty good knowledge to be able to review products because we've used a lot of them.
Yes.
And what's interesting, I think, will be, Gus, that you and I, not only will we maybe sometimes not have the same review, we may take an entirely different approach on reviewing a product, which makes it interesting because we're each caring about different things.
Well, you got to try this on the water now.
Definitely got to try those lights underwater and that's just one thing. In general, I was really more talking about, I thought your review was outstanding, by the way. And I love that you said if we get to 1,000 subscribers, we're going to give them away. I don't know how we're going to give them away. Is it random or something?
We'll figure it out. Whoever sends us money, probably will win.
Great. Now nobody's ever going to let us review anything again. That's a joke, everybody.
Yeah. We'll give them away for free. The other thing I was going to mention is we actually got a request. So we accept requests, info@divetalkmedia.com, or leave us a comment on the YouTube channel. But somebody asked you to review the David Shaw last dive. I don't know if you're familiar with it, where he was doing like 1,000-foot dive on a rebreather trying to beat the world record. And he found a body like at the bottom of this 1,000-foot hole. And then he tried to go rescue it and he got tangled and died essentially. So I want you to review it and talk about why did the guy, okay, he got tangled, but why did he die? Like what caused that? He was in a rebreather, so he didn't run out of air. It's not about running out of air. So I think people want to.
Smart that you asked that because we learn a lot, unfortunately. We don't want to, but we do learn a lot about from accidents.
Absolutely.
That's how we came up with the 5 principles of cave diving.
Absolutely. And we want to cover more stuff like that because that's where you get the lessons, right?
Very
A lot
interesting.
of these accidents and deaths teach us important lessons. So
Good
people
point.
have asked, to talk about David Shaw. We'll be recording that, and then people can check that out in our YouTube channel. So once again, subscribe. We're about 200 subscribers now. Once we hit 1,000,
Cool.
these two
Great.
lights are going to go away. And, again, as we get stuff, we'll just continue to give it away to
Yeah.
our listeners.
Very cool.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And like I said, if you have any questions or comments for me or Woody, reach out to us, info@divetalkmedia.com. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Safe diving.
Safe diving, everybody.